You're listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for deadly uncle conversations. Hey everybody, I hope you're ready for a great episode. We've got Marshall Vielle.
Yes, all the way from Kainai, and you know what a wonderful person and actor I've had the honor to work with, and I'm just excited for you to meet.
Yeah, stick around. Great episode coming up.
Talk to us about your life and how you grew up.
Such a broad question. I love it.
We're
just gonna skip all the small talk and cut straight to the trauma, aren't we?
Not trauma, not so much the trauma, but just tell us about your journey and what makes you you, because you're honestly, to be honest, this is just, you're one of the best actors I've ever seen live. What you do with your art is just amazing. Like, honestly, I'm not just saying that because we work together, which I was lucky enough to, be beside so many people that went to school for it and the whole thing. But, to get to where you're at, I'm sure, it takes a lifetime of what you do with the arts, man. It's just amazing.
Well, geez, that's so nice to say. I'm just blushing. No, it's been where should I start? Well, my name is Marshall Vielle. My pronouns are they, them, and I grew up in Ghana, which is part of the Blackfoot Confederacy down south towards the US border. And I've been living in Oginsus here in Calgary for the last 5 years, just being a theater artist. I grew up on the res, always being really extra and putting on lip sync shows in my living room for all my aunties and my grandma and my mom, and decided that I wanted to go into the arts. I've always been a very creative person. And then, I people always ask me about when did you know that you wanted to become an actor? When did you know that you want to be on stage, or all that stuff? And I just feel like I've always just liked having all eyes on me, and just making others laugh as well. And so I was it's just been since I was very, very young. I used to, whenever we would watch TVs and stuff, we would see commercials come on, and I would just repeat them. It'd be no matter what it was, if it was a herbal essence commercial, or just anything that had a bit of a song, I was always just finding ways to just say that all the time. And so I just always very loved the idea of entertaining others, and just acting, and just tapping into other worlds and stuff. And so that's kind of how I feel I became, or wanted to become, an actor. And so I went to school at the U of L. When I was 17, I finished school on the res, and so I went to the U of L in Lethbridge. And when I started, I was actually an English ed student, so I wanted to study to teach, and I thought that I wanted to teach English at the time, and kind of needed an extra push, I think, to get out of my shoes. You say so many nice things about me being a really awesome actor, but I'm really shy in many ways as well. So it's nice to hear that feedback, because it's just, I've always just been very, very shy as well. I didn't actually start acting until towards the end of my first year. By the end of first year, I switched over to drama, and I was in drama ed. And then when I got to third year, it was time for me to apply to go into the ed program, and I realized that maybe I didn't want to teach drama or teach English or anything. I wanted to find ways to use performance as a tool to teach. I wanted to use acting as a tool to teach. So I decided to do that. I decided to leave my dream of wanting to go into education behind and enter the world of acting. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 5 years, since 2017. Moved to the city, did some shows, and then it just kind of all started to roll out. I think I got started acting at a really good time. I think a lot of folks are really open to seeing different bodies and different skin tones on stage, and so it was just, it's been really nice that I feel I'm all about like how could I use theater to build a foundation of understanding, and how could I use my tools as an actor and as a drag queen to act as a pillar of support for folks as well. And it's been nice that folks have been really really kind in many different ways and stuff. And any time that I get to be on stages, it brings me lots of joy. So yeah, and that's where we met. We met doing the Quest show back in, I think it was 2019 now. Oh my gosh, it was so long ago.
Wow.
Before the
Time
blip.
flies.
I have a question for you, but before I ask that question, the camera's not moving.
Okay, let me just adjust this camera here.
That was my segue to get him to fix the camera.
Beautiful.
Here we go.
Yeah, it's moving now.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah. So when Curt sits down.
Okay.
All right, Marshall, you said you you moved to the city in 2017, was it?
Yeah.
Yeah. What was that like for you? Because you grew up on the reserve, and what was it like moving into an urban center? And like, what was it like initially when you first moved to the city? Did you find that you had supports for you to to kind of get used to life in the city, or?
Yeah, well, like when I moved to the city for the first time when I was leaving high school, I moved from the Blood Reserve to Lethbridge, and I was only 17 at the time, and I was living all by myself. And it was nice though, because I was so close to home. Like home was only 40 minutes away at the time, and so I was able to kind of go into school and kind of join the university community, and built up some supports there. And I was able to like go back home, on Fridays and come back on Sundays and stuff to get ready for another week and stuff. So it was nice for a good, like, I'd say solid, like, throughout my time at the U of L, I was able to kind of go back home whenever I wanted to. And it was nice to kind of be close enough to be able to do that. I still had a lot of supports from the reserve, and I was able to kind of just like be my own person as well. But moving to Calgary, I think was another stretch and another learning curve for me, just because I was a bit further away. Like my community is now 2.5 hours away and stuff. It's not as easy to go back home, especially when we have the weather that we're having now. And so for many ways, it was about like, how can I like build community here? And so I volunteer with like a bunch of orgs in the city. Most of the work that I do, aside from the work that I do in theater, is in finding ways to like just like build community. In so many ways, it's about chosen families in the city is like a huge thing for me, as I think building up a community that is living here. So it's nice that I have supports here, and I often find myself really relying on that chosen family to, I think, support me while I'm in the city, because as we know, it can be kind of hard, experiencing urban displacement, so to speak, living in the city, going from being surrounded by community and loved ones and family, and being surrounded by all of that stuff, and then kind of having to kind of do it on your own in the big city. It can be challenging. And so I found community through the arts. As a theater artist, I've found community by working with Native artists in the city, as well as other BIPOC artists, other queer artists. For me, I think I wouldn't feel as supported, as uplifted or honored or just held if it wasn't for a lot of the folks that I know, like in the theater world as well. I really do think that my work as a theater artist, I think, is what helps me feel most at home here. If I wasn't able to do that work, if I wasn't able to interact with the folks that I'm able to interact with, I don't think I would feel as supported and uplifted.
Awesome.
No, that's amazing. And before Quest, I seen you when I was performing with my old group, Young Medicine, and you were actually doing a show. It had something to do, I can't exactly remember what it was called, but it was something to do with the residential school. And I think Olivia Tailfeathers was a part of it and everything. Tell us about that. And how old were you when that happened, when that was going on, when that piece was being made?
I think the one that you're talking about might be The Ugliest Girl Meets Elvis.
Yes, that is the one.
That was like so long ago. That was back in like 2013. Holy, um, yeah, it was long. It was almost 10 years ago. Yeah, so that was actually like the first professional theater show that I ever did. Ramona Bighead and her son, the late Carl Braverock, they were the ones who wrote it together. And then Ramona produced it, and then Carl directed as well as acted in it. And yeah, it was a play about, you know, how the students at the time who were in these schools, how they used humor as a means to heal. And so there's someone in the play who dressed up as Elvis to kind of you know, make everybody all keep all the students' spirits high, as well as just dealing with, you know, all that stuff as well. And it's really unique, I think, about how we did that play 10 years ago, and even today, we're still we're still going through some of those themes. You know what I mean? Like it's so odd to think about, like we don't think about how a lot of that intergenerational trauma is still, you know, being explored, and still being still finding ways to heal from that. Like I know that I was exploring that almost 10 years ago, and now we're still doing that to this day. It just, you know, shows you how big the impact is, and how long it takes to unpack that as well. Yeah, so at the time, you know, I did that play. Ramona wrote it with her son, and it was about, like, as I said, how these students use humor as a means to heal. And that was a huge thing for me as well, like knowing that, like, these are some of the things that my own grandparents you know, had to deal with as well. And the fact that I was able to kind of honor those experiences through art, through theater. I remember just being a really, really awesome experience. I got to do the play with a bunch of other young actors as well. I met one of my really good friends, Maya, on that show. Maya actually played the ugliest girl. It's so weird, you know, calling someone the ugliest girl when they're so beautiful. But like that was a thing in the play where, like, you know, she was a new student, and all the older girls would call her ugly because she was new and all that stuff as well. But in real life, she's so beautiful. But yeah, no, we met on that show back in 2013, and we've been friends ever since and stuff. I actually lived with her towards the end of my time at the U of L. But yeah, that for me, I think, was the very first professional show that I did. I was acting in school plays and stuff, but that was the first time I got a paycheck. And we performed at the Empress, which was nice. And yeah, really, it's so interesting to think about, like, the first time I got paid to do a show was a show that I think honored where I came from, and honored my own grandparents as well. It just it's nice that I think I was able to do that. I don't often think about you know, that show, just because it was so long ago, but it's nice that you saw it and that you enjoyed yourself. Because yeah, since then I've been wanting to kind of just explore some of that stuff as well. And so I also did another version, which was more that explored, I think, more closer of the impacts of that. Like, whereas the ugliest girl was more about, like, what it was like growing up in that school. I also worked with Making Treaty 7 on a different iteration of understanding what the impact of the Treaty 7 signing was. And that kind of that was more of like an exploration throughout the time of, like, that school, like, more into, like, the signing, and then, like, the impacts it has on us today. And then from there, we did the Quest show. We did the We're All Treaty People show. And so it just kind of that thing about, I think, always doing plays that kind of honor where I come from and honor the stories that don't often get told. Mm-hmm. I just always seem to find myself there as well. And I think that's how I use theater as a tool to teach. That's how I use me performing in these schools as a tool to teach. I think I'm much better useful here than I think I would have been in a classroom setting, having to teach about math and all that stuff.
No, definitely. And it's, you know, like the Quest show was definitely a great time. And, you know, I had been on tour with bands and stuff before, but I had never been on tour with, you know, a group of actors and traveling to many different schools, and, you know, us sharing a room and stuff. This guy said I needed a witch doctor.
And you did.
And we were talking about like we should have our own sitcom in Toronto. Yeah, it was pretty it was quite the experience there, hey?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
It was,
So, I got a question. You said you're a drag artist as well. We've never had a drag
Yes.
artist on our
yeah,
program. So
you are first.
So can you maybe give us a little insight into the community, and are there a lot of Indigenous drag artists out there, and just give us a little bit of a rundown of what's going on, because not a lot of our uncles are too familiar with the drag community. So
Yeah, you would
I
be
mean-
teaching us these two uncles on this show. You would be totally teaching us from
Yeah.
ground zero. So go ahead and let us
So
know what's up.
feel free to talk to us like children.
Jeez. Well, first of all, I'm just really honored to be your first drag queen on The Artist. It's not my first time being someone's first. Just kidding. Yeah, so I started drag like back in 2016, so I've been doing it now for about 6 years. I go by the name Mavis Von Treese. It's so funny because when I was really young, on the reserve, my grandma used to work at the college next to my school, and so like when I would get out of school at like 3:15 or 3:20 whenever it was, but then she wouldn't get off work till like 4:30 or 5, so I would like go and bug her. So I would like prank call her when I was done school. I'd be like hello Joyce, this is Mavis calling. I just like would call her and have these different like weird names and accents and stuff. And she like knew it was me, at least I think she did. So the name Mavis actually comes from like when I would just like call my grandma and like prank call her and just like have a good time, and then I would go and like visit her at her office and like help out with like whatever she wanted to help with, or just to like sit there and be quiet as she typed. Like I just really enjoyed spending time with her. And so when I think about like my drag persona, Mavis is all about like being a granny chic model, like someone who really is obsessed with old Hollywood and everything that the old grannies and stuff do. And so yeah, I've been doing drag since 2016. A lot of what I do, as I said, is like in honoring of like old Hollywood, very that. But also like doing like Broadway stuff as well. As like a theater queen, I do a lot of Broadway songs. Like you typically won't find me doing anything by like Britney Spears or Lady Gaga or any of those. I'm more so about like the old Hollywood glamour and like Broadway. I love to do Broadway songs and stuff like that as well. And at the time I was just like, I'm just doing this because this is fun. Like drag is a chance for me to free the feminine. Like I've been very, as I said, very extra since I was a child, very, very femme and stuff. And so like I would do lip syncs in my living room. I actually won my very first lip sync for Your Life when I was like 8 or 9. In the living room, I did a lip sync to Avril Lavigne's "Why Do You Gotta Make Things So Complicated," and I won, and I was so proud of that.
Yeah.
And ever since then, I've just loved to like lip sync and be wild and funny, and yeah, just like use it. It's another tool for me to like tell stories, and another tool for me just to like teach folks to be more inclusive. I am Two-Spirit, and as a Two-Spirit drag queen, it's nice that I get to be a body in the room and just kind of find ways to share my story. Up until recently, I've always felt like whenever I was in like a queer space with a bunch of other queers, I was often the only Native person in that room. And whenever I was back home and in Native spaces, I was often the only queer person in the room. And so for me, I was always like the only one, right? And so now that I'm able to like meet and interact with other folks, I'm realizing that there's so much beauty in like creating spaces that are for Two-Spirit, are for Native queers to exist, because I think that we often don't acknowledge those stories. As I think we're doing such a great job now with like things like TikTok and everything that's coming out that's bringing folks together, especially being online too, being on Zoom and stuff like that. Like I think having an online presence has like brought a lot of folks together, but it's still not really something that a lot of folks celebrate in our own communities as well. Like I really wish that like folks living on the reserve would talk more openly about being Two-Spirit and expressing themselves in these ways as well. Because I think being able to express yourself, I'm sure you folks know as like artists too, like being able to express yourselves, it makes you smile, it makes your heart warm, it makes your whole body just feel great. Like if we weren't able to express our art, if we weren't able to sing or dance or whatever it is that we do, like if we weren't able to do that stuff, imagine like the toll that it would take on our bodies, on our spirits,
Yeah.
right? And so, and the fact that many folks aren't able to express themselves in that way, like it just goes to show that like when we create like a safer community where folks feel empowered to express themselves, whether it is in a masculine or a feminine way, it could really do a lot to build their self-esteem. And I think a lot of the issues that we experience on the reserve and in the city, you know, as urban natives as well, like a lot of the issues that we see and experience, I think, come from not having like a good self-esteem. And I think so much about what I try to do is really empower folks to build self-esteem and to be confident in what they do, because I think that's truly how we're going to overcome so much of the stuff that we experience.
I think it's like it's a lot of a lot of those spaces where people are still learning. I think a lot of it stems from, you know, past traumas coming from the residential schools, how we grew up, you know, how language has changed and empathy and those things. So, you know, I think like we're all healing through our arts. We're all like providing a space, like whether it's through music, through acting, you know, through, you know, modeling, whatever it is, you know, whatever that we can do to bring the community together in a safe way, I think is really important. And so tell us about your first time performing in drag. What was your mind process? How nervous were you? What was the song and where was the place?
And do you have a website or something where people can check out your drag videos or anything like that?
Yeah, absolutely. So the first time I did drag, I remember, so I was in an acting class, I was in scene study at the U of L, and my prof at the time was a drag queen. And I was in the class and we were, you know, practicing Meisner, which is like a form of acting. It's like a tool that folks could use when they're acting. And part of the Meisner activity that we were doing is what we had to like create or bring into the room some kind of activity and then create a bit of a scenario surrounding that. And so like what I brought was like makeup that I had in like a stage makeup kit and stuff that I had bought as well. It was just like stuff that I brought in, and then the scenario that I gave to that was that I was getting ready for my first time doing drag. And then just kind of exploring like some of the like text and stuff like that came along with it. But after, because what we would do is like one by one, you would go up and do your scene, your activity and your scenario, and then you would sit down, and we just kind of all would, like all of the folks in my acting class would get up and do their thing. So when I was done, we would like offer like feedback and stuff. And when I was finished, my prof was like, "Oh, is like drag something?" My prof Jay, Whitehead, was like, "Oh, like is drag something that you do?" And I was like, and it wasn't. But I was like, yeah, it is. And then they were like, "Oh, well, then you should come and, you know, do a show with us." And I was like, "Okay, sounds good." And I had never done drag in my life. Like it was a complete lie. Aside from like, you know, when I was in the living room having to do a lip sync or two, but I had never done drag. I had never like got up into the full geesh and did everything. I just did it for a class assignment. And then I just lied and I said, "Yeah, I love doing it." So then they put out a call because they had a show, which at the time was called Pretty Witty and Gay in Lethbridge at the Sterndale, was happening in like February, I want to say. The title for that show has now changed from Pretty Witty and Gay to Quaint, Quirky, and Queer, which I think is a really, really cool name as well. But at the time it was Pretty Witty and Gay, and I had signed up. I sent an email and I was like, "Yes, I'm gonna come and do drag as Mavis Von Treese." And they're like, "Yeah, cool. Pick one song and you can come and do it." And I was like, "Absolutely." I picked 3 because I was like, if this is my only time ever to do drag ever, like I want to make sure like I do it well. So I picked 3 songs, which was 2 more than they asked. And I had done, so I did Poor Unfortunate Souls. And so that was all, from the Little Mermaid and stuff. It was all about like, kind of like becoming yourself and yada, yada, yada. And then from there, I went into, I sang. So the first song was like a lip sync. And then the last song I did was a lip sync as well. But the song that I did kind of in the middle was a song called Rose's Turn. From a musical, and I sang it. I remember I was like, well, I have to sing it. Like drag for me is it gives me the power to do things I don't feel comfortable doing. And like Curt, we've chatted about like me singing and how I love doing it, but I'm also really, really shy to do it and stuff like that. So I was like, well, if I'm gonna do drag and if this is like the one and only time I'm gonna do it, then I'm gonna just have to jump right there and do it. So I sang live for the first time this song, and then I went into there were things I could do from Greece. And so for me, it was all about like that performance, which was about like 10 or 11 minutes, was all about like, I'm this really powerful being who wants to steal energies and take as much as I can from all of these young, beautiful humans and find that and swallow this beautiful energy and become this beautiful goddess, yada, yada. And then talking about like Rose's Turn, which is more about like I've been cast aside for so long. Now is my time to like, take my moment in the light and shine into There Were Things I Could Do, which is more about like, well, shit, like drag and freeing the feminine, being a feminine body, like has always been something, that was so taboo or like frowned upon for me. And so like moving into like There Were Things I Could Do was like, well, I could do drag, I could be feminine, I could be fierce and fabulous, and all that stuff. But because there were things I could do in life. Being queer isn't the worst thing that I could do. Expressing myself in a feminine way isn't the worst thing that I could do in life and stuff. And so for me, it was about like, let me like take this space, because I think like so much about being an artist is, taking space and holding space for others as well. But in that moment, I was like, I needed to like take space to, tell parts of my story. And that kind of went into writing my own play. I wrote a play called Where the Two-Spirit Lives, and that premiered in Lethbridge. My prof Jay runs a place called Judy's Playhouse, and so and a theater company called Agecoutay. And I had done tons of drag shows at the club. I had done they used to do monthly drag shows, so when I was living in Lethbridge, I would do those. And when it came time for me to like kind of do my own show, I had kind of told them about it. I told I was like, oh yeah, I'm doing the show, and it was kind of in passing, because at the time I was like, let me just like do a bunch of songs that I love to lip sync to, and let me create a story behind those as well, and find a way for them all to connect. So I basically created a playlist of songs that I love to do, and then I wrote stories along with them and kind of weaved it all into, and I'm calling it like mixtape theater. Like it was something where I just kind of created I just created a mixtape for my life, and then from there I kind of found ways to like weave it into one story. And then Agecoutay offered to produce a show, and so we were wrapping up the Quest show, the tour, and then I had went to Lethbridge back in May, and I had rehearsed my show in May and put it up in June of 2019, and then I was invited to a couple festivals. I went to the Raven Transforms Cabaret in Vancouver that October, so October 2019. And then I was invited to a festival called Outstages in Victoria. So I toured it there in early 2020. And then I had like a whole Fringe tour planned. I was going to go to Peterborough Fringe. I was going to go to Winnipeg Fringe, Edmonton Fringe, Vancouver Fringe. And then obviously, the blip took place, the world shut down. So I wasn't able to. So I had this whole like Fringe tour planned. And it just kind of, didn't go anywhere. But I still have this show Where the Two-Spirit Lives, which has toured to all of these different places. We were up in Edmonton back in April. We did the show up there and stuff, and I'm in talks to do it here as well. But the show for me, like it's very personal. Like I think like what I talk about, what I explore in the show, is basically like my story. I call it one part memoir, one part lip sync extravaganza, because that's what it is. It's me using the art form of doing drag, of lip syncing and telling my story through that way. And so it's a very personal story for me, where I'm very like I'm not cautious, but I'm very intentional about where I do it, and when I
Mhm.
do it, it's one of those things where I'm like, this is something that I can do. It's always in my back pocket, but I'm very intentional about like the space that I choose to do it in, because it's just a very personal story for me. And I
Yeah.
think a lot of people who I've known, a lot of folks who are a part of my chosen family in the city, don't know about a lot of the experiences that I've had growing up and stuff. And so when I get to do it, when I get to do my show, it's also about, you know, kind of uncovering a lot of those truths as well, and, you know, opening up those wounds and stuff. And so like it's a very personal story for myself. And so that's part of the reason why I'm so like picky and choosy about like where I do it and stuff, because it is like a really big deal for me. Like I think for a lot of folks it's like, oh, it's like a drag lip sync show, but I think it's very personal for me and how I do it and stuff. And so I don't know if that answers the question, but just that like
No, it does.
drag
Yeah.
queen has always been made to like free the feminine and tell my story in a different way. And I love doing it. And folks can, you know, follow me as well at Mavis Von Trees on Instagram. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's
Cool.
amazing. And, you know, you got to talk about, you know, that's amazing that they have these places in Lethbridge, you know, because, you know, we've heard the stories about Lethbridge being, you know, racist and small town and those whole things. So what was your experience, you know, having these shows? And by the way, I did watch the reading of your show, and it was very personal. And, you know, um, there was a lot of stories about your life that go in between those lip syncing, like you call it, those lip syncing parts of the show. But yeah, I can see why you say it's personal, because I remember, you know, being there for the reading. But yeah, tell us about, you know, Lethbridge and your experience there.
Yeah, I mean, well, Lethbridge, you know, as we know, it is like a small city. It's like or like a big town. Yeah,
Yeah.
so there's when first was there, obviously I was like, oh, this is a brand new city. I mean, it wasn't brand new because I was visiting there all the time, but living there and being there 24/7 was like a whole other story. Um, but I mean, it's one of those places where, because it's seen as like such a small city, and because like it is considered to be a very conservative city as well, a lot of folks don't know about like the arts community there, and how it thrives. Like it is a place where a lot of queer folks do get to thrive in many different ways. I know that like I don't think that I would, you know, fully embrace myself as a queer performer if it wasn't, you know, performing in those shows at Dee Dee's Playhouse once a month, or going to see shows that had queer folks on stage or told queer stories. I don't think that I would have been able to fully express myself in that way if I hadn't seen it. And so I know it exists. Like I know that there is a place for queer theater there in the city. Because Theatre Tray, you know, has been up and running now for over 10 years. And I know like the city itself gets a bad rap for being like a small conservative city, but I think the work that a lot of folks are doing and bringing to that area, I think is really great, because it is showing that like, although it is small, it could still, you know, be as inclusive as they can as well. Obviously there's still work to be done like anywhere, right? But
Yeah.
I think the fact that like Lethbridge, Alberta has a queer theater, but Calgary, Alberta doesn't have a queer theater, I think is something to celebrate.
Wow.
Um,
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
it says something about the community as well.
exactly. And you know, it's crazy because, you know, growing up with what we do, you know, it's nice to see those spaces, you know, because I lived in Lethbridge. You know, I lived there for 5 years, and I was busy as a performing artist. There is a lot of work there. There's a lot of
mhm.
work with the different communities that also surround Lethbridge as well. So, you know, I was there for a while. So one of the things that we're talking about on the show, you know, when we speak about spaces, um, how important do you think it is for every major city across Turtle Island to have a safe space for Indigenous people to pray? Not only, you know, to get together like a community center, like a friendship center, like they have, but actually where we can have our ceremonies inside the city limits, sweats. We can have an indoor facility to have our feasts after, to have maybe funerals for people that live within inside the city that can't make it out to the land. And do you think it's important that we change our mind frame as Indigenous people to say that we need to go out, onto our land? Should we have that space right in our cities? What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. When I think about the need, the desire to have places for us in the city to gather to practice ceremony, I do think it is something that is incredibly necessary for us. I think that part of acknowledging the land and the traditional roots that it has, I think, is also offering spaces for stuff like that to take place. It's absolutely great to be on the land and to do these ceremonies in our homelands and stuff. But I think a huge part of taking up space is letting things like this take place within the city limits as well. I also think that it allows for folks who are living in the city a chance to experience this as well. Because we think about some of the surrounding reserves. We there's always this notion of having to be invited in. And a lot of folks, don't get invited in. And so I think being able to bring some of these, finding ways to introduce this knowledge for folks who are living in the city, I think is absolutely necessary. I think about things like smudging and praying in our ways. I think of those as birthrights that we should all have access to. But oftentimes we don't in the city because there's not a safe space for us to engage and to invite folks in that way. And so I think a huge part of what I think large cities and small cities have to do is dedicate a space so that Native people could gather in this way and make it so that it is accessible for them. And we often think about accessible as does it have a ramp for a wheelchair? But we have to think about accessibility as so much more than that. It's about is this a sober space? Is this a place where folks can bring kids? Is this a place where folks who come from different backgrounds will feel seen and heard? Is it a place that is inclusive to things like Two-Spirit folks? Is it a place where the language that folks use will be respected and acknowledged? And is it a space where we can hold ourselves accountable if we do make mistakes? Right? There's so much more in terms of accessibility that I think we have to think about. But it's that thing where there's tons of public places to gather in the city and stuff, but I still think we still hear stories about our own folks who don't feel comfortable going into those places. Mm-hmm. And I think a huge part of that is because they're not acceptable or not accessible, and because they're not accepting of a bunch of other folks as well who may or may not look like them. And so I think it's absolutely necessary to have places in the city where folks could come to and pray and do ceremony and gather. A huge part of what we do is gather. I know that that has been a very sensitive thing for folks in the last few years, but I think gathering, we can't lose that aspect of gathering, and I think giving folks a place to gather, I think, is absolutely necessary. In my own work, because I run a program called Where the Rivers Meet here in the city, and it's a program that aims to really uplift and honor and raise awareness and find ways for Two-Spirit folks to connect with each other. And this past summer, I commissioned, last year around this time, I commissioned my friend Alana Bluebird to take photos of a bunch of Two-Spirit folks living in the city. And then we took those photos, and now we're opening up an exhibition at the Grand Theatre in the bar lobby area there. And so trying to raise awareness, but then also in terms of I took those photos and I invited another artist, commissioned another artist, Caleb Belrose, to come and paint a mural at Sunnyside here in the city. And it was really important for me to do a mural, because I think that a huge part of that is giving Native folks a chance to gather. And although a mural is a nice thing for folks to look at and to take photos of and to admire, but I also think it is a really nice place for folks to gather and to bring their kids and see the beauty, see how beautiful Two-Spirit folks are, and what that work does to honor them, but also to bring them there to have a picnic and just gather and share space. But I know it's still really hard for folks to do that because of bylaws and everything, that's all of these systemic things that have been put in place to almost keep us at bay, or to keep us confined to our own lands or, you know, our own in our house or on the reserve and stuff. I think that there's like so much that's been put in place to make sure that we can't express ourselves or that we can't like each other and stuff. And so I absolutely think it's necessary for folks to be able to gather, especially in the city, because I think we need to, you know, make spaces more accessible, and we need to make spaces safer for folks to feel like they are empowered to show up and be themselves.
No, I totally agree. And you are definitely
a deadly uncle.
Jeez, auntie.
You're definitely a deadly auntie uncle, eh? No, but thank you so much for being on today. And I know you're in rehearsal right now. I don't know if you can give us some details, but let us know what you're in rehearsals for and where people can check it out, if you can give those details.
Oh, absolutely. So currently I'm rehearsing for the Jungle Book at Alberta Theatre Projects here in Calgary. The show goes up during the holiday season on December 1st, and it goes until December 31st. And so we're just in rehearsals. We're heading into week 2. We have about 4 weeks of rehearsal, and then we'll have 4 weeks of shows. If folks want to, you know, learn more about like the show itself, they can go on to atplive.com and look up the show. It is like a brand new adaptation of the show itself. So it's really returning back to some of its source. I'm sure we're all familiar with the cartoon and stuff like that as well. And but yeah, it is really trying to like pay homage to like the South Asian life and all of that stuff, as well as, you know, a lot of these characters and, you know, how they explore life and law of the jungle and all that stuff as well. I'm playing Baloo, which is nice.
Hey,
yeah.
That's awesome.
I told my mom, I was like, I'm gonna be like Baloo, and she started to sing like bear. Yeah,
I can already see it. I can already see it. You're gonna make it so hilarious. I'm sure it's gonna be awesome.
Can people buy tickets anywhere? Because that's probably a great holiday gift.
Yeah. So folks can buy tickets at atplive.com.
Nice. Well, thank you so much. Thanks, Marshall. Beautiful to see you once again, and I know that our paths will cross soon, and I can't wait to see one of your shows, and I hope that I get to see your personal show sometime soon as well. So thank you so much, brother.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. We'll see ya.
Hi.
You're listening to the Deadly Uncle Podcast,
a safe space for deadly uncle conversations.